afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining me for this Tuesday afternoon update, and hope you have a Bible with you and that you'll open it to the book of Romans, to a passage that we looked at a number of weeks ago as we talked about getting back together for worship. We are absolutely doing that, and we're still following through on the same basic ideas that are right there in Romans chapter 12 as Paul talks to us about how we're to live as we give ourselves in total sacrifice to God and find out and prove what is His will for us, that we are to love in a genuine way, that we are to live in a time of tribulation in such a way that we outdo one another with brotherly affection. We're still holding to all those things, even as we are in the middle of something that we had completely no idea that we would be in. First we had the pandemic. We were at home for that 10 weeks or so, and then last weekend, something that happened at a time after we had already taped Sunday morning worship services, and so you didn't hear anything about us speaking to it in worship this past Sunday because everything we had done had already been done when the incidents with George Floyd took place in Minneapolis, Minnesota, a city where my brother's family and his wife and daughters live. I've been pretty close to that simply because you can imagine trying to stay in touch with him and his family who live just a few miles from all of those events. It's been a horrible, horrible situation for everyone. First of all, the injustice that took place that robbed a man of his life in the middle of a city in such a way that justice is going to need to be done there. But then afterwards, also injustice. As some people try to protest peacefully and others try to hijack the situation into something much more and something completely crazy, something only for themselves. Justice that needs to be done there has left everyone with this sense of what in the world are we supposed to do? We've all had our opinions, all had our thoughts. Hopefully you've been listening. Hopefully you have been hearing the things that are going on. I've tried to do that myself, and hopefully you've been doing what I've been doing right here, which is a lot of prayer and a lot of study. I do a lot of that up here in this upstairs study. I do some meetings with people that need to be confidential, that need to be away from distractions, but mostly I try to meet with God up here as I try to listen and try to work on my own life and my own particular calling. I hope you're doing the same thing, because these are difficult days of dealing with the tribulation, working with each other, and then trying to continue to hear from God and do what's best and what's right and what's good. In that process, I've tried to listen to people from all points in the spectrum, and a couple of people who happen to be African American that I've been listening to. Tony Evans is an excellent voice out of Dallas, Texas, and has some good words to say that I was listening to. And then also Tony Dungy, who is a fine Christian coach who's written quite a bit on the way of men following Christ, had some good things to say too. And one of them was, in particular, related to the book of Romans that you and I have been looking at. Is the end of the chapter that we talked about a couple of weeks ago. And so I want to encourage you as we come together for worship this coming Sunday to remember that we're still following after that same relationship. As Paul talks to people in Romans, he's talking to people, Christian people, who are having trouble getting along with each other. Let love be genuine. Outdo one another in brotherly affection, he says. But he also says, at the end of that chapter, as Coach Dungy quoted, chapter 12, verse 21, don't be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. Don't be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. That's a good word for these days, because evil absolutely is taking place. You and I have witnessed it in many different fashions. But you and I can't be surprised by that, because Jesus has told us in this world will have a tribulation. Jesus himself experienced the injustice and being robbed of his life by people in authority that should not have been in authority. But he also has told us that in the midst of all of these things, we are not to be overcome by evil. We are to overcome evil with good. And so Christians are witnesses. We're not just witnesses of events. We are witnesses for Christ in this world. How do we do that? We'll talk about that a little bit more this coming Sunday as we continue talking about what it means to be a Christian, what we've missed when we haven't been worshiping together as a group, as we come together as family, how we do that as witnesses for Christ out of the book of Acts. We'll talk about that this Sunday. But our main focus is just to get together again, to be worshipful, to worship with each other, and to hear God's voice together. It's in those settings that God speaks and encourages us all. So let me just encourage you to be a part of those gatherings. On Sunday, we'll be gathering at 9 and 11. That's a little bit different time, 9 and 11, but it gives us more time to clean. Both services will be identical because the entire families are going to be together. Children, teenagers, students, adults, senior adults, we're all going to be together. And we're going to try to maintain social distancing. Do us the favor of calling and making a reservation ahead of time. We're not going to try to force you into certain seats. We're simply going to suggest that you maintain social distancing, that you wear a mask if that's comfortable to you. But our hope is in that by letting us know, we'll be certain that we have plenty of room for everybody in every service. We'll also have a service at 5 o'clock that afternoon for people who are in need of a little bit more strict guidelines, need it a little bit more clean. We're calling that our high-risk service, people who feel themselves to be at risk. We don't want you, in simply wanting to come to worship with us, to place yourself at risk. So come at 5 o'clock if that's your particular category. But it's our desire for all of us to be able to begin worshiping together and have kind of a soft opening as a church. We'll be doing that on Sunday, and we'll be also opening the office on Monday. Those doors will be open. We'd love for you to let us know in advance, and don't be surprised if there's that social distancing that we maintain, because we try to keep our people safe also, as well as you when you come to see us. We also are trying to engage in a soft opening for all of our buildings. There's no reason for these buildings to be sitting empty when so many other parts of our society are operating, and we want you to be able to use them for God's glory. We are going to try to maintain a little bit of a different kind of way, though, because we want to be able to maintain those buildings being as clean as they possibly can be. So don't be surprised if your group wants to use the buildings sometime during the week, that you need to call, get that approved, hear what the parameters are, so that we can, with our custodial staff, maintain as clean as possible buildings, but also use God's buildings for His glory. But whatever we do as we come together personally, as we come together as groups, and then as we gather as a church on Sunday, let's follow after God's words in Romans. Let's try to do that in a society where God can use us to be part of the solution. Let's not be overcome by evil. Let's overcome evil with good. By the power of God within us, let's operate as His church family and be agents of good and bring about peace, the peace of Christ, and glory to God, even in the midst of this absolutely strange season that we are finding it to be here in 2020 as people, God-called people, at Kingwood First Baptist Church.